Okay, welcome everybody. This is a welcome that's videoed. And we're going to talk about the ending of last session. And Rosa, you want to know what happened?
Well, yeah, because somebody had asked this wonderful question about, what are your, what makes you active? What is your passion? I think that was maybe Masumi who had asked that question. And then, oh, I don't know, so many wonderful things happened. I have a lot of notes here. And then, Susan, you had been talking about something about how sometimes you feel ashamed of not being an activist, but then you were saying, I have a passion when I see, and the video got cut off. And I'm like, what's Susan's passion?
So, well, that will be a mystery forever.
Yeah, I don't know what I said.
And maybe we can fill it in now.
Well,
Maybe you can, just continue from the point where you got cut off.
Just to dispel the mystery of it, Clara had been the host, and she had to go, and so when she left, the video was turned off. We didn't know that would happen.
Yeah,
anticipate that. So Clara had to leave, and she left, and then and then Susan the whole video was cut off. But from my point of view, it was perfect timing. It was as if the whole session last time seemed perfect to me. Everything exactly the way it needed to be a work of art. And when the video was turned off in the middle of what Susan said, it seemed the perfect timing. Do you remember, Susan, what you were saying?
no, I don't.
But it was
I mean, I remember what I was saying because I watched the video, but after the cutoff, I don't remember what I said my passion was.
Well,
and Susan and Lynn, I think it was Isabel who left, if I'm not mistaken, because I'm never the host for these meetings. So I just want to clarify that.
Yes.
Okay.
Whoever was host left.
Isabel.
Oh.
Whenever Clara says something, it's being clarified.
I don't know.
This was recorded, Jim.
I want that part cut out.
Well, I felt after this whole thing was over last time, I remember saying to myself these words like, you were a fool, me, and stuff like that. And I think that's habitual because I wasn't sure what I said. It was not, I wasn't sure what all I said, except, it felt really authentic, genuine. And after a while, I started feeling this is really good that it came out like that. I mean, that whatever it was came out. And then I was a little worried that I might have hurt Masumi's feelings. So I checked that out with her, and seems I didn't. But I thought, I thought some people might have had reactions to it because it seemed to me raw. It wasn't, as Marvin has told me, that he feels he doesn't, well, he didn't know me. Right, Marvin? I mean, I think you know me better now, but
I definitely do.
there was a certain something on the outside. I don't know how to put it.
I felt it was very
heartfelt and honest. I thought, I thought it was, you took a risk, because, I think it seemed like all of us were going along with it. And then yours was
Going along with what?
along with the idea of, it seems to be like, I mean, if we're talking about activism, is
Mhm.
something that, you do, you are out in the streets protesting, I guess, and maybe there's different ways to be an activist, and
Mm.
but I thought you were just kind of, you was a little bit of a dose of reality, I think, for me, and I
Mhm.
appreciated your honesty. I really did, and I thought, oh, bravo for Susan to
Mm.
for saying
Thanks.
how you felt,
Thanks, Roberto. I did feel better because I felt I was giving a wrong impression. And I was a very not aware of the world young person at all. I was deep in myself. And I think, it's taken its toll, although I'm less deep in myself now. I'm not somebody who lived through the 60s with it, and that was the time I was in my 20s and 30s and the 70s. I was not in the center of it at all. And I wish I had been. I think I missed a hell of a lot. But that's how it was. There were, there were other things occupying me.
Can I just go back to just, has everybody watched the videos? If you, I think most of you have. If you haven't, it really is a treat, I think, to watch the meeting. I would get some popcorn and settle and watch that meeting. But the end of it was like a climax of, we had all this trouble playing the song, and I gave you the wrong version of the song, and we went through all of that. We had the song, and then some people really liked the singer and said something about the song. Just I remember Yoka said, "Oh, that was great," and Susan, this is just my memory. Susan said, "Oh, I don't belong here. I'm not an activist like this." Oh no, first Masumi said, "I want activists, the quiet activists, not the noisy activism." And Susan said she didn't belong, that she wasn't an activist, and she felt bad about herself and didn't feel that she could identify with being an activist. And then Jim said, "Well, I'm an activist in supporting Susan to be herself," right? Or something like that. Some way that you said it that was perfect. It's like, well, that's activism. And then in my memory, it cut off right after that. So it felt like it cut off right in the right place. But I think maybe Susan went on to say that her passion is about being authentic, and that she feels very passionate about not pretending to be what she isn't, or something like that. So she might have gone on to say that.
It's true. I don't know.
I'm wondering, Lynn, how you think about activism and Jen Lynn's action steps.
Yes, I think they're a good combination, but I don't want to lose the thread here, Marvin, of Rosa being at the, at the tip of her seat, seeing what Susan was going to say, and then Roberto saying that he had just been realized that he was just going along with the noisy activism protest, but really when Susan said that, that was a dose of reality for him in terms of, oh no, I don't want to be that either, the noisy activist. So do I have all of that right? I'm piecing together. Yes, Rosa.
Well, I just want to say that I really appreciate I said that on the video. I wasn't here last time, but I appreciate
You're cut off.
that happen next is partisanship of focus. When Jim was saying,
Oh, we don't hear you at all.
You're cutting out, Rosa.
Rosa, we need you.
so
Can't hear you.
She's frozen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, turn the video.
Does
What
she
do we imagine
after
going to say when
It-
she connects with us?
it just sounds like what happened afterwards was that Susan was talking about how she has a passion for authenticity. But I'm just pointing out the focusing moment of that. I loved it when Jim spoke up. It was humorous and light and wonderful and supported Susan in where she was, and just the focusing notion is that that's what allows the carrying forward of then Susan starting to talk about what she is passionate about. So that's all.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Rosa. Also that for me, the irony that we were trying to describe and feel into and create, what is this overlap of a focusing spirit and an activism spirit? And Susan was saying, no, I'm not that kind of protester. I'm a quiet person. And then for Jim to say, I'm the activist that supports Susan, for me was like this perfect ending, because it wasn't only allowing Susan to carry forward, but it was also this beautiful sort of ironic way of saying, well, that's the intersection. You know, the kind of activism that supports the quiet person or the unpolitical person, or whatever you would call that, to be herself. That's the kind of activism that beautifully put together the focusing spirit and the activism spirit for me. And I didn't pick that up in the meeting, but then when I was editing the video and I was watching the video, I thought, wow, that was just amazing the way that came out.
I also felt so touched. I didn't say it, but I could, I mean, my heart came alive. When Jim spoke.
Which is the effect activism should have.
Yeah, there's a reaching out in your activism, you know, and a connecting. And it feels like it's maybe that's in activism and in focusing. The connecting with the feeling, the person, the welcoming of whatever it is, you know. You didn't say, I don't know, you made me uncomfortable too. That's what I was thinking. But you were not uncomfortable.
I was uncomfortable. I took a risk.
Okay.
That's why it was activism. I said, I have to stand up for this position.
Oh, yeah. What
Right.
did you feel? I felt I had a comrade. I wasn't all alone.
That seems like an important distinction, that activism has this risk in it, the standing up for something in it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could sort of say that the focusing spirit has standing up for it in it and risk in it, but it isn't the primary flavors that you feel in a focusing spirit.
I have a little different take, because I think we're separating two things that are really joined. That is, to be an activist, you've already had to do some focusing. That is, you already had to be thinking about what you want to be an activist about. You just don't get a picket and write anything on it and walk out the door up and down the street. You've already endured a situation for a while. You've been frustrated. You've tried certain things in yourself, and now you join with others, usually, to be more outspoken about things. Maybe you've tried to work within the system, but you've done a bit of focusing. You've been curious about possibilities. Maybe you've been gentle and thoughtful and quiet, but there isn't that separation for me that we seem to be making in the group, that these are two different things.
Yes, Isabel was saying that very clearly last time, that they're not two separate things, that focusing and activism go together.
Yeah, I guess maybe the way that what you said, Lynn, and what Marvin said both make sense to me. I don't think that they're necessarily two separate things. And I really appreciate what you said, Marvin, about that. We don't just go out there on the streets without having put some thought into it, right? And maybe we've been silent and quiet for a long time, and then we decide we need to do something else. But I want to go back to what Jim said, not last time, but what Jim said right now, where he was clarifying, like Susan said, oh, it seemed like you weren't uncomfortable at all. And Jim said something like, well, I was a little uncomfortable because I felt like I had to speak out, right? And so the thing is that when we're doing focusing one-on-one in the therapy office or in focusing partnership, even if we stand up for a voice in the other person that we see might need standing up for, right? But we're not doing it in public. Whereas what Jim did is, it's not public, but it's a group here. And so there's a little bit more of a risk in standing up and saying what this person said might be unpopular, but I support their right to say it or whatever, right? So to me, that's a little bit the difference. And it's just context, really. It's not anything else, but yeah.
I just want to say that I was the one that sort of initiated this project, because I was sort of interested in it. And for me, it was not really about it being separate or anything like that, but the spirit of it is different for me. This is my subjective feeling, that the spirit of activism in my life is a spirit of protest and determination, and I'm not going to stand for this anymore. And the spirit of focusing is a kind of gentle listening. I think you even read what I wrote, Rosa, when we were talking about it last time. But it has a different flavor to me. But I'm certainly not saying that they're different things, but that these two flavors could be put together and make something else, and fill each other out in some kind of way. And I love that idea.
Well, I wasn't here last time, but somebody did read your sentences, which was wonderful. I don't know if it was Annette or Yoki or
Yeah, I think.
what?
It was BJ, I believe.
Oh, BJ read. Yes. Because it was really beautiful what you'd written. I was really struck by the question. I think it was Masumi who said, I would love to hear, what does focusing mean to you? And what does activism mean to you, from various people here? And I've been just sitting with that question ever since I heard it on the recording. So thank you so much.
Rosa, I'm just making a correction here. It's yoga, not yogi.
Yoka.
Yoga.
Okay.
Thank you, Clara. I was like, whatever, it's okay. Thanks, Rosa, too. Yeah.
Rosa, would you like to say what comes to you about Masumi's question?
Well,
Yeah. Last week, and I was
yeah.
thinking of you and wondering what you would say.
I think for me, the first thing that came is, wow, it changed at different points in my life, right? So at one point, activism felt like going out there and being on the streets and being really courageous to take a stand for something. And then after doing that for some period of time, I realized that for me, like, it's not really sustainable to be doing that all the time, right? And it just felt like, so it just started to feel like that's part of what activism is for me. But then there's also like organizing, like it isn't just all about being out in the streets. It's about building community and developing relationships and creating organizations and like all of that stuff. And maybe people call that being an organizer instead of being an activist. But I just really, I resonate so much with what Jim said and did, because I think that we have the opportunity to speak out in a gentle but clear way anytime we're in a group. And so I just think that there's, oh, and then I loved in the video, someone was talking about the pink sneakers. I think
That was Isabel.
yeah, and she was talking about how that person was really being an activist. And so I think anytime we feel there's something else that needs to happen here, and I am going to take responsibility because I care for helping make something happen that isn't going to happen unless I do something about it. I think that's now what being an activist is for me.
I love that. I resonate a lot with that. I think for me, I would say it's not conforming to groupthink. It's sharing opinions. So it can be really loud and it can also be quite quiet. It can be just sharing dissent and sharing also opportunity and possibility. Can be quite beautiful about. I think of like Charles Eisenstein's book, like I forget it. It's exactly like more beautiful world. We all know our hearts is possible. Like actually having the courage to share what you think is possible is activism.
Would you
in
say,
education.
I love that quote.
Creating the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, something like that. Yeah. I see BJ's hand.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. There's something in me that feels like it wants to advocate for something. First, a lot of what I hear you guys talking about now sounds more to me like advocacy than activism. And in the last week, I've just done a lot of Google searching on antonyms, synonyms, et cetera, the linguistic history of the word activism, when it got included in the dictionary, et cetera. And I think I sent y'all an email about this study I've been doing about the Northern Ireland conflict. And, oh, I've wished for Derek to talk about this. The Northern Ireland conflict and the use of what they're coming to talk about is warrior talk, and how warrior talk is sustaining a kind of a transgenerational trauma, because these people that are doing this research use things like war imagery, making the other become an enemy. There's this long list of things that they describe as warrior talk, and how even when the thing that caused it is long past, in individual families and in small groups at the bar or whatever, people have become accustomed to using these kinds of metaphors. And so it continues this trauma in the hearts of the people when they don't even know why they have the trauma. So that's just an example. In this whole thing about how words evolve over time, that some people say, some linguists say, that pejorative words tend to take on a more gentle, inclusive, for lack of a better word, sweetness. And that over time, they fall into use in metaphor and whatever, such that they don't have the anymore. And it's a kind of a way that people ameliorate the things that this group of people views as destructive. So there's something in activism that has a kind of an edge that it seems to me in this group, we're trying to kind of take the edge off of it. Yeah. And so I don't know why that makes me want to argue, because it's a beautiful notion, really, except that if you're a real purist about what does a word mean in the common parlance, and to me, we're talking more and more about what I would say is advocacy and not activism.
BJ, see just for a minute what it is that that rubs you the wrong way about using the word differently than it might have been used many years ago. We had started sort of with the idea that what do you want the word activism to mean? What do you want the word focusing to mean?
Mm.
At least to use something as out, or you wouldn't want to use the word activism. Just take a moment to see what we would gain by saying, oh, we're not talking about activism. Or what you would gain by saying, I don't want to use that word. What the personal is in it.
There's a nobility that is worthy of respect when someone is willing to put their very lives on the line.
Hi. Hi, Ruby.
Abby, that's okay. I liked it actually. It lightened up the situation. I was about to get very serious. That's it. It seems that to me there are people who identify as activists. I don't identify as an activist in what I see as the pure sense of that word. But I'm not opposed to what's happening here. I'm just remembering people I have known who are proudly, adamantly, I was a part of a group of people who, interlocked their arms and sat with their legs crossed at the courthouse, except I wasn't, and they all get arrested 3 days in a row. I wasn't with them. I was in the crowd bringing other people who weren't quite so brave, but who wanted to be what activists in my time called bodies. We just need more bodies here. And there was this acknowledgement that they were taking some special risk, some honorable objection, that the rest of us were just bodies. But we were needed. We were important. They wanted 97 bodies that day.
Let me just say back that to make the distinction between the word activism and advocacy for you preserves some kind of dignity and honor of being willing to take a big risk and to fight for something, to put something on the line that might be getting arrested or any other kinds of fighting, and you want to preserve that. And you want to save that word to mean that. I'll just say that I've often thought back on my life and wondered how my life would have been different if I had gone on the freedom rides in the early 70s. If I had sat at those counters and been spat on or pummeled for wanting a cup of coffee. And I didn't do those things.
You didn't do those things. And so there's something in you that feels a little uneasy, or could you?
Sure, I'm not sure, BJ, I'm not sure that there's a part of me that wishes that I had done that and that I had the courage to do that. I believed in it. I supported it. But there's another part of me that feels like that wasn't the way I wasn't me in some kind of way. Anyway, I think we could many of us could get into, did we want to be activists in certain ways that we weren't? How do we feel about that?
I would like us to clarify something, because the January 6th rioters, who I would call rioters, would also consider themselves activists. And so there's a right and wrong, there's a morality element here that we are perhaps presuming that all activism is positive and constructive.
No, I'm not, Norman. I mean, yeah, I'm not. Yeah.
But can we just let Clara say what she was?
Well, I was just going to say that Abby also had her hand up, and I know Rosa's had her hand up, but maybe we can all, have a turn here. Maybe Abby, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up, because it feels like two sides of the same coin, the way I see it, or I've heard other teachers say it. Gay Hendricks had said, like, as people's consciousness evolve and we begin to see things from a different perspective, we either become a healer or an activist and wanting to
Oh,
change in the world. And so I just thought, that was relevant to this conversation. And then also Thomas Hubo, who talks a lot about collective trauma, also mentions about the healing of trauma and then how activism comes in. But if we're actively, and this is the side I think that I find sometimes, and if I think there's beauty to activism, but then sometimes activism's actually running against the edges of the frozenness of trauma in our society, of collective trauma. And sometimes that trauma requires the healing to come in for it to melt. And I do think there's a place for activism to really do take a stand and to shake the system, just like DEI and Black Lives Matter as it occurred. Yeah.
Go ahead, Rosa.
Just wanting to breathe for a moment. It's a lovely quote, Abby, that as people mature, we become either activists or healers, or maybe both. Yeah. And then trauma, and where trauma fits in with all this. I really heard the wanting to honor the courage of people who are willing to put their lives on the line. And I also want to talk a little bit about the shadow dynamics, like how many times do you have to put your life on the line before you get to call yourself an activist? And when you stop putting your life on the line, do you need to start feeling guilty that you're no longer an activist? Or, like there's a way it can get kind of competitive sometimes in activist circles. And when I was 30, a group of friends and I that we met at a Thich Nhat Hanh retreat, we created a sangha called the Mindfulness, Diversity, and Social Change Sangha, which was for people who were interested in activism and interested in Buddhism. And we part of the ground rules of it, or the bottom line agreement, was that we weren't going to have any kind of comparisons, right, of who had been an activist for longer or who wasn't an activist, or who, or with activism or with spiritual practice, that regardless of your level of experience in either of those, that this was a place for all of us to just share our experience and our practice and like that. And I just remember from younger days being with people who put their bodies on the line and getting arrested myself once unexpectedly and all that. And then later, like, there's a kind of a symbiosis, right? It's like, if you have people who are putting their bodies on their line, you also need people who are going to go pick up their kids after school when mommy or daddy is in jail.
Yes.
Right? And
Yes.
so we can have labels like, these are the support people and these are the activists and like that. But I don't know, there's a way that it honors, and there's a way that it kind of separates. And I just, I've just found it really helpful to have a more inclusive definition of activism for myself.
Yeah, thank you, Rosa. I think that's really helpful, the way you talk about it, and also the people who are supporting the activists, like, aren't they also activists, in how far, and that way that it doesn't really make sense to make it very narrow, and you have good activists and bad activists. Like, activists, it's such a to me such a broad term, it's not very defined at all. What do you mean by that? And then also what occurs to me talking about it here is that we're talking about activist and who is an activist and who's not. And it's all about is. And, you know, that's very labeling. People are not activists. They do something that is activistic or whatever the word is, you know, like, and sometimes you don't do that constantly. You don't do that constantly throughout your life. Like everybody's saying that when I was young, I was doing this and that, and now I don't. But, you know, yeah, and people are saying you do some other type of activism in another stage of your life, or when you're in another situation, or sometimes you do something very tiny, or you do something very daily, or there's so many ways, and it all depends on doing, right? Because activism, I didn't look up the word, but you know, for me it has to do with acting, you know, to do. So yeah, that's my take.
I don't want us to lose Marvin's point that seems to be hanging in the air about sort of assuming that there's a good and a bad, that it's good to be an activist or bad to be, you know, or these people are activists and these people aren't. But then Marvin said, sort of very starkly, being an activist doesn't mean that you're doing something moral. But there's also in what you said, Marvin, it sounded to me like that we would all agree, all assume what's moral and what's not moral. I'm just curious about that. Do we all assume it? I think for me that the insurrection was a very complicated thing, and I don't understand it. I don't really understand how those people were thinking about it, what they felt they were doing. And I would want to understand it, but I don't assume it. I don't assume that there's good activism and bad activism exactly, or you know, in a focusing way. It's sort of like, I want to know, what does that mean to that person to stand up for that, and what is the standing up for that? But when I'm saying this, I'm saying it as an activism. I'm saying it as an activism that says, let's not assume that we all agree on what's good and what's bad and who's right and who's wrong. It's very complicated.
Well, the activist has an idea of what's right and what's wrong.
Yes.
I think that we might all agree with that, at least that, for me, it doesn't mean I have to agree with them to respect them, especially if they don't behave like people who want to make a noose and hang somebody, but the kind of activism that I'm willing to risk my life in, like the freedom riders, in terms of, I'm going to be nonviolent myself, but I'm going to support your right to get out there and do what you do, so long as you don't kill people, for example. You know, it comes down to freedom of speech in a way. That's not very, you know, inward thinking, but that's a part of it.
Yeah, thank you, BJ, and Rosa and Yoga and Lynn, everybody. I mean, it's so interesting. BJ, I really, when you first brought in this word of activism and I was so glad that you did, because I was sitting here with something that I'm not quite sure what it is I'm sitting with. But part of, these activism stories that we've been saying or talking about, like, these simple ones feel more like that's just being a human being, standing up for somebody else in a situation. It's not, is it activism to do that? To be a human being, to, stand up for someone you see that might need some support? That doesn't feel like activism to me. And it just feels like the act of activism, taking a stand that you believe is going to make a difference is different than just being human and kind and supportive of another human being. Seems like there's a difference there. And the more we're talking about this, the more it feels like I don't even know what we're talking about at this point, and I don't really like it, because I think that I think that we all, need to be of service to helping other human beings. And sometimes that takes sitting on a bar stool and getting knocked around so that people who have a different pigment of skin can have rights. To me, that seems like activism, not, oh, I'm helping this old lady across the street. That's a sign of activism. Like, for me, that doesn't really resonate, and I don't know. I think, a form of activism is sitting here talking about focusing and how that's a form of activism. I don't know. I guess sometimes it can be, but it just doesn't land for me. I don't know. That's something that's kind of alive in me just now.
Well, I think we were last time talking about the quiet activism and the noisy activism. And maybe all of us have some distinctions, but I sense, Clara, that for you, it's not just about the words. It's not just that you could use the word advocacy or soft activism or something like that, but that there's something in you, the activist in you, that wants to tell us to get going here. That it's important to be an activist, that you want to advocate for activism. You don't want it to be watered down, and you don't want it to seem like it's okay to just help the old lady across the street.
As a act of activism. That just seems like a human being right thing to do.
Right.
I mean, I don't mean to judge, but there's a lot of people that need or are just marginalized and treated poorly, and I don't know. I just think are taking some kind of stand to make a change that is going to be to help other human beings have a better life is, to me, what activism is.
Right. You are taking a stand for taking a stand. It's like you're.
Yeah.
I think we could say, well, just sensing, pausing for a minute, is that really being a focuser?
Is that a form of activism to take a pause? I don't know. I mean, we can twist our words to make anything that we want to make, really.
Right, but you're making, we don't want to water it down. You're making the stand of wanting us to take a stand for something that we really care about. And you want the word activism to mean that, and you want us to do it. It's not okay with you for some people to say, well, that isn't my calling.
No, that's not true. It's fine to say it's not my calling, but if you're going to call yourself an activist, then be. Does that sound so obnoxious? I'm sorry. I don't.
No, but it doesn't. It sounds like you would like that. That would be, but that the feeling in you isn't that it's okay to say I'm a focuser, but I'm not an activist. That's not my temperament. I don't fight, I heal. And I'm not, my way of standing for something is in a soft, gentle, helping the old lady across the street. So I just wanted to leave that edge in there for you.
Well, I appreciate when somebody helps me. Right now, I have a restriction of bending, twisting, no bending, twisting, and lifting. So I happened to drop something yesterday, and somebody came by. I tried to bend down to pick it up. I couldn't do it. Somebody came by and bent down easily and picked it up for me, and I appreciated it. That kind of, I don't know, what would you call that? You don't want to call it activism? You
No,
want
I
to call
call
it
it
kindness?
kindness.
You want to call it kindness?
Yeah.
I appreciated it. So simple kindness is important.
There's another human being, yeah.
But you know, we are in this group, all or largely East Coasters. I'm the only West Coaster, and I'm an East Coaster. I'm a New Yorker, and we're forgetting most of the other people across America who don't have, and including Masumi and Kate, who don't have the same perspectives. I go out and I picket for abortion rights. Across the street, there's somebody picking against abortion rights. Is it both activism? So we seem to here have the idea that our activism is the right activism, and the other guys, that's the wrong activism.
So Marvin, is that just is that a felt sense for you?
Well, I certainly am feeling it in my body when I say
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I think when we stand up for something that we believe in, whether it's in a milder way, I mean, there's like a huge range of ways that we can stand up for what we believe in. And some, of course, as others have described, are far more risky than others. But probably a lot of the time, there's a little bit of risk, at least, and sometimes a great amount. But, you know, somebody's reaching out to help somebody pick something up, or just being kind, doing a kindness, that doesn't feel like activism to me. Activism feels like when I'm taking a stand that someone else might not agree with. So in that way, there's a risk of rejection, because I believe in this. I'm saying I believe in this. I stand for this. So it feels like that's a piece of activism, and I can't say that I've done a lot of it in my life in a really in a big way. I mean, in my younger days, I was just surviving and living, much like Susan was saying. But I'm at a point where I'm trying to do more, whether it's going door to door in an election, or, you know, little things like that. And would like to be doing more with voting rights kind of thing. But not, you know, it takes a risk when, I think it's taking a risk when we're involved with something called activism, depending on how one defines it. But it seems to me that that's part of the definition, and not the kindnesses that don't put me out there in a way that could lead to some kind of rejection or angry response.
Let's just take that in, Nancy, and see what comes there. Nancy is saying, we're talking, she wants activism to mean taking a risk, standing for something and taking a risk, even if it's a risk at a dinner party of saying something, if something needs to be said or something.
And rejection. I found you're saying rejection really powerful.
Mhm.
In a really powerful.
I just want to say that, brain scientists have found that the circuits in our brain when we experience social rejection are the same circuits as when we experience physical pain. So I don't know that there's a huge difference between those two. I do really like the taking a risk. It's just, it could be taking a social risk and it could be taking a physical risk, right?
Maybe we hear Nancy also, because, yeah. What comes for you, Nancy?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said there.
Sorry. No, because I think Lynn first asked you to take it in and see what comes. So I just want to
Yeah,
make sure,
I wanted all of us to take that in,
yeah.
to sort of digest that and see where we are with all of this. I find myself very interested in how this is landing for you, Joe.
Well, I'm stepping back and I'm trying to make some discernments here. Because for me, I'm hearing the discussion of, well, what's activism versus what is kindness? And for me, I would define activism as an activity that is done to change a system or influence a system, as opposed to kindness, which would be simply to help someone help Marvin pick up something that he dropped. If I think about activism, I think about, trying to influence or change something systemic, or to create some system to address a wider issue. So for me, I make that distinction. And obviously, depending upon what system you choose to change, there's a varying degrees of vulnerability that requires. And so you've got a full range depending upon what system you want to take on. But I think for me, when someone says, well, what's focusing got to do with that? I think as a focuser, if I'm going to do some activism, I've got to be sure that I'm grounded. And focusing is a way for me to ground myself, especially in terms of really getting down to what's underneath my need to change this system. And where's that coming from? Because if it's coming from hate, if it's arising out of hate, then, I really need to step back and say, really, is this the direction I want to go? And focusing is going to, show me the layers of that. And maybe underneath the hate's fear, and I got to look at the fear and so forth. But focusing gives me the grounding that I need to make sure that as I move forward to change the systems that I'm living in for the better, or what I hope is the better, that I'm doing it from a position of, what in biospirituality we call caring presence or loving kindness. And that flows into the whole nonviolent approach. Because that's going to color my approach to the activism that I take. I got to be damn sure it's coming from loving kindness. And focusing is the way I've got to come to that. So I would look at it systemically and say, if you're trying to change or influence a system, then you're an activist. But if you're helping Marvin pick up something, that's an act of kindness.
I really appreciate what your discernment, Joe, because back to what Lynn was about at the very beginning of all this, and kind of like Clara said, it's become kind of fuzzy to me what we are actually having this conversation about, because it initially I thought was about how do they cross.
Mhm.
And how do they cross in focusing terms doesn't mean, I don't think it means how are they different, but it means, or how they're alike. But I mean, when they intersect each other, then what?
I think one feeds the other. I mean, for me, like what Joe was saying, focusing helps me to go inside and to know, well, what do I stand for? What do I believe in? And then I can take a stand with something. But I think that they go really well together. They pair well together, but it's not that they're the same at all. They don't need to be the same. We grow, we develop through focusing, and then that can enhance any taking a stand for something that we might do.
I really like that, Nancy. We grow and we through focusing, and that enhances our ability to take a stand. I just want to comment on, there's this edge that I'm hearing that feels a little just a little harsh to me. Like, I think edges can be really good, right? But this, it's like I think is really important to look at dictionaries, right? But and dictionaries are taking a snapshot in time of what a word means in a certain social milieu at a certain point in time, and that changes and that evolves as people use it. So I don't want to lose the what does focusing mean to you? What does activism mean to you? As a way to inform maybe what shared sense is emerging here of what activism means to us right here. But there's just a little bit of edge that I've been hearing about, this is what activism is, or this is what focusing is, or whatever, that just feels a little, I don't know, this feels a little essentialist in a way that is not my experience of how language shifts and evolves in different contexts and different cultures and different subgroups and different moments in time, you know. So I don't want to be totally fuzzy about it. And I really find that people are adding tremendous value by saying, well, this is what it means to me, and I want to stand for what it means to me. But that's different from this is what it means, right? There's a slight difference there that to me makes a lot of difference.
I'm wondering what Kate and Masumi and the people we haven't heard from, like Roberto and Mary, really, and Jim, of course, Jim.
We haven't heard much from Annette either.
Except in chat, she's putting some amazing things in there.
Yeah. I asked ChatGPT what it is, what activism is. There's violence, and it said that it's not legitimately activism if there's violence. That's called terrorism or insurgency. And the other thing I put was a definition from the conversation. So I said, so far, I'm hearing activism is doing something that comes with social or physical risk in order to change a system to make it kinder.
Mm.
Yeah, that's the ones we haven't heard from yet.
I could say something. I don't want to speak at all in the essentialist way, though. So, you know, I think I'm going to just talk about very personally what means the most to me in either one. And I guess I know focusing, you know, a lot better than activism. It's the connection with the world. It's the impulse to grow from within oneself, to meet something outside of oneself. That is really important to me because at one point in my life, I was so unaware of everything outside of myself. You know, and I think focusing can go inside, but can also go outside from there, outside. it can bring a profound meaning, which I think is what we're trying in force to see if we can nurture something like that, between us and what's different. So that's what appeals to me and what I think about, I guess, and in activism and in focusing. Does anybody respond to, does that reach anybody? Or I think we have very different reactions, very different responses. Things hit us differently. Thanks. Rosa, did I see that? Did you raise your hand? Oh, sweet. Okay. That's all I needed to know. Somebody, was sort of with me. And that's what I mean. That's a meeting, I think. That's a being interested. And I'm bigger. My body is bigger than this skin bag. And Rosa's is. And that's a wonderful experience. I wonder if activists, maybe some people feel that. And, January 6th, we that very night, didn't we have I think that we had a meeting, a force meeting.
Yes.
And we were talking about how, how we felt. And I remember Lynn saying about the what do you call them? I don't know what to call them, the people in the Capitol. The what?
Insurgents.
Insurgents. They think they're patriots.
Yeah.
That just kind of blew my mind, but probably. They don't think they're the bad guys.
There's something that tickles me about that.
I also think that the system that you're advocating or an activist wishing to change can be a group norm. It can be anything outside yourself. For example, if the world was such that picking up things other people dropped just isn't done because it's shameful or it's interfering with their autonomy, or it's interfering with the economy because the street cleaners will be out of a job or whatever, then to bend down and pick something up from Marvin would be activism.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for saying that. I've been sitting on a desire to say, how large does the system need to be for it to be activism, for one thing, because I think a group is a system, but also this thing about contextual and how it depends. People were getting arrested for giving water bottles to people who were waiting in line to vote, right? Because of the politics in this country. And in that context, like giving somebody who's thirsty water, you would think, oh, that's just a kindness. But in that context, it was an act that you were risking getting arrested for. So anyway, yeah, I just think it really depends so much on the situation. Yeah.
There's just something about they thought they were the good guys. And it's so difficult, I think, for us, for me, but I think for us as humans, to recognize that people who we think are the bad guys think that they're the good guys. And what does that, we never, I shouldn't say we never, because that isn't accurate. but we rarely really take in that we think we're the good guys and we think whoever them is the bad guys. And we don't really take in what it is like for them to feel like the good guys.
And I love that. I wonder if somebody has a facet, a story of being the bad guy or or working with that to bring it a little bit into an experience.
Well, in New York, I've I also just want to broaden this idea that that the group here is sort of all of one homogenous kind of group of East Coasters. I think we have roots in many places in the world and many cultures. But I remember sitting in a meeting and folks who were psychoanalysts being unaware of our, just our laws of our board of directors, and wanting to, take over a part of this money-making training thing. And it's like, who's on the side of the winners, who's on the side of the law, who's on the side of what works and doesn't, who's thinking one step ahead. And when we talk about felt sense, it really causes me like it sends me into deep thought and focusing and making art and writing when there's so much fragmentation in our country. It's not like we don't own all the fragmentation. We may deny it, we may dispose of it, but it's important to, if we're really going to change things for the better, then the people that don't choose to be activists, they're activists because they're in danger, are in a different position. It's a real privilege to sit here and think about, our thread of activism or our definition. And my purpose is just to speak, because I was asked to speak. It's not to kind of preach. But when I talk about activism, it ends up sounding like that. So I apologize.
I didn't quite get what sounded like preaching, Mary.
I'm just trying to put it in the context of,
I would like you to preach at me in this moment. Would you do that?
Oh, goodness.
I think one of the things that we're trying to do here is to bring each other out. I mean, I think that this group has become an amazing leadership group, and we're trying to bring each other out, be able to be more playful about things, to be more improvisational, to be able to experiment. And in the guise of that, Mary, I have the feeling that that preacher in you has something wonderful to say, and I would love you to say it just the way it would come out.
Well, it's like the 4-year-old that would line up the stuffed toys and teach them. That's the part of me that gets activated. So that's what I'm talking about. And
I want to be one of the stuffed toys right now. I want to be taught by you.
I just really love this group because I was I was on the end of things after, like a 20-year initiative where I got, like I was marooned, I was cut out of the group because I stood up for what I thought were the right things. And it's not like I won't ever be an activist again, but what I value the most are the BIPOC people that call me an ally, rather than, it's hard for me to label myself an activist right now because I'm healing from, like, I'm not sure how to categorize it, but I'm healing from being oppressed because I did something that was very normal. I only simply identified myself, and someone who had power took offense at that. And so I lost, to some extent, like I do many things, but I lost 25% of my community and long-term investment in an organization and people. And when we really do the work, we are all risking things. We may not hear about it, we may not know, but people are reacting to us. I hope that was clear. I can't really say more than that.
Let me give it a try to see if that if you were going to preach to me, maybe you would say, my beloved group, I want you to know that there can be a lot of mess involved in activism, in standing up for things, and it can be very confusing, and you can have big losses, and then you have to really heal from that. I want you to know this isn't an easy, clear, right and wrong kind of thing. It's a very messy thing.
Thank
Would
you.
that be the sermon?
That would be the sharing, the sharing and the prayer, that no one hears it as a judgment against anybody else. It's my experience.
I want to just appreciate you for sharing your experience, Mary, because I felt like, yeah, it helped me to ground down into a personal experience than to stay in the conceptual level of what is activism and what is kindness. So that's very helpful.
I was moved, Mary, about your input. Yeah, I like what. Oh,
No, please go on. I wanted to thank you, and thank you.
It's interesting. Sometimes I've been told that I preach, and I never, because the concept is new to me, because perhaps I don't know, in American culture, it doesn't have a good connotation. I think in other countries, or maybe in Latin countries, I don't see, I don't recall having the concept of somebody being preachy. So I mean, I don't know. I then I was told, oh, you're preaching, or, but so I realized, it has a bad connotation. It's a bad thing. But anyway, just a side comment. But Annette, when she put on the chat about the when the legitimacy of activism, one is not illegitimate when violence and insurrection, it is when there's violence and there's insurgents, then it's not activism. So there's a value ascribed to it. I think that there's a point that I feel that I have to make a choice. I can't. I'm not. If I'm in the street and neo-fascists are marching, I'm not going to be open-minded. I can't. They probably would not want my lifestyle be legal, and eventually it would eliminate me from the world. So there's a point where I feel like I have to make a choice. What's important to me, and not feel bad about it. I mean, I don't feel bad about it. I don't feel like I'm superior. I mean, I know that there's freedom of speech is important. I agree with that. But if you notice, I mean, the government apparently watches the growth of Nazism, because it becomes a problem. It is a problem for society. I mean, but I think it goes along with what Annette put on the chat, when it is legitimate type of perhaps activism, I guess, because it is surrounded by insurrection and violence. There's something illegal about it, I guess. You say in the quote, unethical, counterproductive. I don't know, just making a comment.
Roberto, I hope it's okay to say this to you. It feels to me like you have so much that's so important to say, and that only some of it comes through, and that there are these sort of guards at the gate holding back what you would want to say, and that I'm part of the time trying to guess into it, what it means. And I know it has important meaning.
No, thank you, Lynn. I guess that was the felt sense. I felt that. And yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, it's really, because, it's always a struggle. It's gotten easier, I would say, being in this group, and then also in another group with this, like the guards, the mental guards, this fear about speaking out and retaliation, and perhaps, I guess, maybe relating to what Mary was talking about, and being ostracized, or and also rejected, the rejection by taking a stand or saying something that we believe in. And so anyway.
Could you say what you said before, just like one sentence of what you really would want us to hear?
I guess, with that what you were saying, Lynn, that that I guess that what you sense is that I feel there's a lot of things that are meaningful to me, for me, to be able, I would like to express, but the there are guards, there's all these protections and fears about expressing it or being rejected or not accepted or being ostracized.
Yes,
So yeah.
yes.
I just, I'm very moved by what you shared, Mary, and I'm very moved by what you shared, Roberto. And I guess I just want to say, I think those fears are real, you know? I think that there's a way in which, people talk about historical trauma. I think we're still living in the historical trauma of the French Revolution. Part of what happened in the French Revolution is that all these good people who were fighting for democracy were, cutting each other's heads off. The next week you fell out of favor and you were no longer part of the in-group, right? And the whole circular firing squad thing, right? And I do think that there has been a history of there being a lot of infighting in political activist groups. And I know it from my own family lineage. My grandfather, when Castro was part of a group that was leading the insurgency in Cuba, there were 5 different people. It was a group. And at the end, there was one, and the others had fallen out of power. And if you supported one of the ones who had fallen out of power, you were told to get out of the country, not because you were a right-wing person, but because you had supported the wrong progressive guy who was no longer in favor. Right? So that stuff is real. That stuff happens. And that's part of where activism needs focusing, right? And I guess that's one of the reasons that nonviolence is so important to me, because if we have an agreement to be nonviolent, then at least we can sit around and talk with each other until we work it out when we have our disagreements, instead of being, okay, this guy was my friend before and now they're not my friend, so now their life is in danger. It's just a little crazy. And I think there's a lot of historical trauma from the French Revolution still that most people are not addressing. And I identify as a progressive. I'm not, but I think we need to deal with our own shit.
I think we're trying to talk about the fear of standing up for things, the fear, finding ourselves on the wrong side with the wrong side, according to somebody else. Going back to Kate, what you said when we talked a few sessions ago, and you were saying that you didn't even know why you're so afraid to say your thoughts, your opinions. Maybe we're talking around or trying to get at this this fear that, whether it's fear of rejection from your family at a dinner party, or it's fear of being kicked out of an organization, or fear of whatever it is, that there's a very powerful dynamic of fear.
I wonder if focusing can help with the fear. I mean, I think it maybe can. It's helped me when I've been afraid of being rejected or not liked. It's helped me a lot.
Focusing has helped me to accept myself as I am, not always so wonderful. So I think in that way, it leaves me less fearful of the rejection. I can tolerate it better when it happens. I know I'm going to be okay. Maybe not happy, but okay.
I think it's a different thing when you're afraid for your life, maybe, or livelihood.
Definitely.
But that's where I think focusing again helps ground us. You know,
Yeah.
it helps us be with the fear instead of staying at the level of the fear. It gives us the capacity to go deeper, to see what's underneath that, and to be with that in a caring way. You know, I mean, we've said it several times here. Activism is complex. It's got a lot of pieces to it, and there's a certain level of vulnerability, and underneath the vulnerability, there's the fears, and underneath the fears, there are parts of us that are strong. There are parts of us that are shadows. But focusing opens the door into all of that. So for me, I think you have to have focus. You have to have some kind of focusing process in order to really ground yourself. Because if you're not grounded and you enter into activism, you're just going to go with the flow of stuff. And you know, even when you're an activist, you have to be damn careful that you don't get caught up with the mob. You know, look at what mobs have done. You know, well-meaning people all of a sudden get caught up and dragged into stuff that they had no intention of being dragged into. So I think focusing as a way to ground ourselves at least puts us in a better position if we choose to be activists.
And I guess help us to decide whether or not whatever it is we're afraid of is worth taking the risk.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes it won't be, and other times it will.
Right. Right. Yeah. You know, focusing is my doorway inside.
I think that we're lucky to have focusing. So many people don't have it. And
Right.
it is
Right.
such a powerful tool.
Well,
I want to say something. I'm still have trouble understanding the definition of activist. I'm reading the line Annette put in the chat. Activism is doing something that comes with social or physical risk in order to change a system to make it kinder. I love that. I think all focusers are inner activists. Focusing for me is like doing something that taking risks in order to change my inner system to make it kinder.
Like that.
I know I went to a different direction. Sorry, Barb.
I like that.
Say that one more time, Kate, so we'll remember it.
For me, focusing is like taking risks in order to change my inner system to make it kinder.
I love that.
I do too, Kate. Oh, you have such a different perspective. It's yeah, it always um, just amazes me. But your insights.
And they still have a lot of fear speaking up. I don't know. It's the fear is about it has so many levels. The fear is about speaking up, or it's about nothing is there. It's just sometimes as I look inside, nothing is there. I wonder myself. I wonder. Really, nothing is there.
When you speak, you have such wonderful meaning, and there's so much there. It's deep and helpful. So thank you for speaking.
Thought it was powerful, Kate, when you said sometimes when I look inside, there's nothing there. It's just so powerful, statement,
I think there's only something there, or not only, but often there's only something there when someone wants it. If nobody really wants what's really there for me, what really matters, then it doesn't even stand up and raise its hand.
Yeah. Maybe because nothing matters. I have sense of that. Nothing matters.
Yeah. Because you don't matter. It's like we have to matter. We have to feel like we matter to each other before we can even matter to ourselves. Or it's sort of one thing. But I think you really feel, Kate, that what you say matters to us.
I don't know. I guess.
May you come to know that it matters to us.
Yeah, well, maybe I shouldn't assume that, right? That's not a focusing way to assume that Kate feels that.
I think what you assumed is right. I often have that feeling. Like nothing matters, or nothing happens inside me matters. What I'm thinking, my opinion doesn't matter. I often have that.
Reminds me of Masumi last time when you asked us what matters to us, what we have strong feelings about, what we have convictions about. That was such a wonderful question.
How are you, Sumi?
Well, I really admire Kate for saying how you feel about changing, being an activist inside your body and to be kinder to yourself. I just wanted to, what I have been thinking is a little different, going back to the subject that why didn't I join the activists as a student when they were against the university's professors' policy about oppressing the students' movement. And why didn't I join my friends occupying the building? And what hindered me, I pondered, was it because I was timid? Because I was not courageous enough? Or it came to me was I wanted peace. I wanted a peaceful means to communicate. And that probably came from my upbringing in my family. The violence is not good. You just have to talk out. And the thought came to me afterwards, though, what in present time, I am against the government policy to have more armament in Japan, although we abandoned all the military force once before, but now there's a movement in the government that they will spend more money for making, what is it? I don't know the name, but
Missiles, maybe? Missiles?
Pardon?
Missiles?
Yes, or the things to attack.
Hmm.
And of course, the Prime Minister visited Ukraine recently and told their government that they will offer money that would not attack others. They would give support in other ways, and that was okay with me. But what is it that I don't go out and protest the government movement to have military force, stronger military force in Japan? It came to me that there's in me that cannot foresee the success of what even though I protest, there won't be any good influence on changing the government. And that is the discouraging feeling, disappointing feeling, even though I try to protest, that won't change that won't influence the whole political tendency or the so what I change mind, what would influence, what I do would influence the change to make a better environment. I would go to thinking, what can I do to change really? What is that is possible for me to change the environment? And that brings me to think, okay, I will do something for my community. That may change. That may make a change our lives around me. So what I'm trying to say is, why don't I become really a protester or the political activist? It's because I can foresee that won't help anything, that won't bring any changes in the society. What I want is really to change something around me. So that brings me to do something about doing something for my community, like organize a gathering for the elders once a month, and to have a better communication so that all the elders around me would become more healthy. So I think in my thought, foreseeing and disappointing feeling of what I do won't influence anything would bring me to think, what can I do then to change really? So that's what I was thinking, what hinders me from becoming a real protesters or activists. I don't know if I came across what I mean.
So Masumi, what I heard, if I may reflect, is that you want to make a difference. You want to bring change, and you don't want to go protest because you don't think it will bring change. And so you want to think about what things will bring change because you really want to bring change.
Mm-hmm.
Is that close?
Yes. And then at the beginning I said, because I thought that my upbringing as a peaceful communication
Yes.
was what is hindering me not to join the student movements.
Right.
But that wasn't the only
thing.
Factors.
Yeah.
Your focusing came in there, right?
Yes. And Masumi, I'm just so kind of blown away by what you're saying. Golly, well, let me just project onto you. I could hear a sense of your own personal worth, that you don't want to spend your life's energy in a place that it might not make any difference anyway. But you rather use your life's energy in an area where you have some sense of confidence that it might matter. And I also want to ask you, used the word in your upbringing that your environment was, let's think about this and let's talk about this. It sounds very rational, and I'm wondering what was the feeling of that, the sense of awareness of that. I'll say a belief that your family had, or your community had a belief that it's better to talk things through than to hit or to hurt. What can you go back to that? That is so interesting to me.
Well, okay, my parents were Christians, and when they had something they needed to decide, my father and mother would go upstairs and spend time without us, and come back and then do something. And I assumed that they were talking over things. I've never seen them quarreling in the surface, never ever. And that's one of the things that I remember believing, that talking can solve difficulty.
Mm, mm. That's really beautiful that that's the way you interpreted that. Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Also, my father was a professor in a university, and there was student movement. They really accused one professor, one by one, like, bring to the stage and then just attack that each professor.
Mm.
But then I hear my father was pulled up in the stage.
Ah.
I just heard that story. I don't know why they didn't. But the students didn't bring my father up on the stage, but he probably had something in personality or communication with students that made the students decide not to attack him.
Mm.
That was also a very impressive event that influenced me.
Mm.
He must have had something that convinced the students he was not no-violent person.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Giving us a flavor of the peaceful activism of, very intentional making a difference through peaceful movement. I'm aware that it's I think 2 minutes to 8. So it's almost time to stop. And I'm wondering if it would be possible for those of you, and I'm hoping that all of you can participate. Those of you who will participate in our big talk, could we meet for a half hour next week to talk about just the logistics of how we'll do it? Are people free at 6 o'clock next Wednesday?
Marvin should speak up at this point and tell us that we're not.
Oh, that you're not free.
Well, I think your invitation is only for those who have roles in the big talk.
What I'm thinking is that we'll all have roles. They won't be necessarily pre-planned, but that we'll be bringing the public into our discussion. So the way that I'm thinking about it, we'll have a welcome. Maybe I'll welcome people, maybe someone else will welcome people as well. And we'll bring people into this discussion of what, maybe with an attunement, what is the spirit of focusing, and then have people's responses, and then have the activism song and ask people their associations with the spirit of activism. And then the second part will be breakout rooms. Joe, you had wanted partnerships, and maybe some of the rooms could be that also, but others might want just sharing and having people help with those breakout rooms and facilitating. And something there that is bringing people into our process. But it would be good for us to sort of go over it a little bit together and see what you think.
And I'm sorry that I'm not going, we have a vacation that we're taking for 2 weeks. I'll kind of spur of the moment because my cancer numbers are down. So I'm not going to be available. I'm very disappointed that it clashes. I was looking forward to being there.
disappointed too, Nancy, but we'll do other, this is just the beginning of our doing things in the world, our big talks. So there'll be others.
Could you repeat the time and date? I have to calculate what time here.
Oh, yes. Have you all seen the flyer? It's on the 16th, and it will be the same time. We made it the same time as this meeting now, knowing that people could make it.
Uh-huh.
Sunday, the 16th, the same time as now.
Lynn, it's Rachel. If you were able to do next week at 5:30 instead of next week at 6, then the people in Marvin's group will get the prep that you need.
I couldn't hear you.
5:30 rather than 6. I could do that. Could other people meet from 5:30 to 6 next Wednesday evening?
Next Wednesday is for you 12th?
Yes.
And for me 13th, right?
Right.
And that means 6:30 for me.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh my God.
I'm calculating aloud. Sorry.
And also for Kate.
And also for Kate.
It is 1 hour earlier or later.
For me, it's 5:30.
Oh my God, Kate. Wow.
If I don't appear, that's why it's too early for us.
Well, we made it this time, actually. I was going to make it in the afternoon so other people could come in other time zones, but we made it this time because we thought that would allow all of us to come. But it doesn't really.
So it sounds like the 6 o'clock time was better than the 5:30.
Yeah.
Better for me.
But better for you. Marvin, could your group meet a half hour later?
It's fine with me, but I have to discuss it with them. Rachel and Jim are participants and the 3 others.
Okay.
We'll do the best.
Okay. So those of you who can make it, next Wednesday at our regular time here, 6 o'clock, we'll meet for a short meeting just to sort of go over how we're going to do it, but we're not going to have it be very planned out moment by moment, but more bringing people into our process and saying, I would love many of you to say the things you've already said to us. And maybe we could think about that. I would love you to share those things, including you, Masumi. Perhaps you could ask your question about what is important to you, what is passionate for you that you asked last time, and you could ask that the way you did then. But we can think about things that you've already shared that we would want to share. But we're leaving lots of room for people to share what they want to share.
And I advocate that you record that meeting so that those who can't be there can watch the recording.
Absolutely. Anybody have anything else to say there about that? Joe, it would be great if you showed your doll there and the contributed your thing about the levels. We have so much to share, but mostly we want to just open this subject.
It's a Matryoshka doll. Oh, hang on.
Okay.
It's a Matryoshka doll. So if we say, okay, this is activism, and the question is, where does focusing interact with that? Well, essentially what focusing enables us to do is understand what's within us that drives us to activism. And as we focus, we encounter all different kinds of feelings, emotions, anger. And as we stay with those in a focusing way, we get deeper into the fears that we have and hopefully get into what is underneath those fears and what is truly meaningful for us. And as we do that, we get down to perhaps really core things that drive our lives and really ground us. And the beauty of focusing is that it keeps us from having a hollow activism, because if that's the kind of activism you have where you're not grounded, you've got a problem. You're going to be dragged along and find yourself involved in stuff that you really don't want to be involved in. So anyway, that's my Trish Cadell story.
Right, that will be your contribution if you decide to, if you decide that's a
Yep.
good one. Okay, so I'll see those of you who can make it at 6 o'clock next Wednesday, and have a wonderful week. And Yoko will put up the video of this meeting, and we'll watch it and see where we are. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.